Guys, I'm getting a little bit hungry now. It's beef, bacon, and eggs. I'm going to have that this weekend. Welcome to Vigorous Nutrition. Don't get disappointed. Don't click away just quite yet. There is some performance-enhancing drug content in this video, so stay tuned. We're going to talk about cheat meals. For Vigorous Nutrition, I'm Coach Steve. Let's discuss how to incorporate cheat meals properly. And I know cheat meals is a little bit of a swear word, but it's very easy to understand for everybody out there. Let's discuss it, because I see a lot of people really overdo their cheat days and completely undo an entire week of dieting simply by raising their caloric intake to like 10,000 calories on a Sunday, which is not how you should approach it. So let's discuss that in this video. And I'm sure most of the guys out there that are going to start a diet pretty soon for their, summer beach bod, they're going to incorporate cheat meals on a Saturday or a Sunday. You can adhere to your diet from, let's say, Monday to Saturday if you do a Sunday cheat meal, as do I. I've been doing this, I think, the majority of the time that I was bodybuilding for the last 20 years or something. I eat super clean, or, I control my macros and my micros from Monday to Saturday. I follow the meal plan to the T. I measure all my food and make sure that it's all healthy, unprocessed, and self-prepared foods Monday to Saturday. And then by Friday, I get a little bit anxious, Saturday comes around. Sometimes I start Saturday evening with a little snack. Usually still healthy, unprocessed foods. Besides yogurt, is that processed? I don't consider yogurt processed food. Either way, Sunday, you're really looking forward to it. And then lunch and dinner is all you can eat or all you want to enjoy, right? And it has a little bit of a social aspect. You get to go out with your partner. So you leave your bodybuilding prison or your diet prison that you've been adhering to for 6.5 days by choice, not forced. Hopefully you're not forced to diet, for 6.5 days a week. You're doing that by choice. And then Sunday afternoon and dinner, late in the evening, you get to eat what you want. But it's a choice in food that is going to determine the success of your overall diet. Because, picking out on buckets of ice cream and cake and cookies and all that kind of stuff, all that processed garbage is really going to set you back, because caloric intake could be as high as 10,000, maybe even 20,000. It's very difficult to get over 6,000 calories in from healthy, unprocessed food that is cooked with love and care and sanitation. But it's very easy to overdo it if you go, to the grocery store and you buy everything that has a 2-year expiration date. And it's mostly processed carbs and saturated fat. So you have to choose on which foods you're going to cheat on, which is going to determine the success of your diet overall. Now, personally, what I do every Sunday after 6.5 days of eating healthy, I still have a breakfast on Sunday morning, which is a typical bro food, a part of my diet, and also eggs or, that kind of stuff. And then in the afternoon, I get started. Now, in some cases, you might want to do an intermittent fasting approach where you don't have breakfast, and maybe your mother wouldn't agree with this approach, but considering that caloric intake is going to be significantly raised for the rest of the day, you might want to skip breakfast and do intermittent fasting until you reach your lunch destination. Now, for lunch, you have what you want, but with some restriction, some guidelines. Buy something for lunch that is not going to make you feel full until dinner. So you're still going to have 2 meals that day, maybe a third meal for breakfast. Again, depending on your caloric intake and your goals. So let's say you have lunch. Ideally, you go with something that digests by 4 o'clock. Now, if you have lunch around 12 o'clock, you have a 4-hour digestion window. And what is that going to be? Could be a hamburger. For most guys, a hamburger, if it's a healthy one, a gourmet hamburger that's prepared in a restaurant, and not a takeaway hamburger that you get through a window from the comfort of your car, a fast hamburger. It's basically the same as processed food. You want a gourmet hamburger with a nice bun, some lettuce, some other vegetables. And, I know some of you guys don't like pickles, so I'm not going to force you guys to eat pickles. But, like a piece of meat that's like 90% beef and 10% fat, not 50-50 or 70-30, something like that. I have no idea what the macros are on fast food because I never eat there. Even when I'm starving, I prefer to skip that. Last time I had McDonald's is like 10 years ago, but I have hamburgers frequently. I just get them in a restaurant. So you can have a hamburger for your lunch. You can have a sandwich. That's what I've been doing for the last couple of years. I'd like to get a nice, clean, well, maybe not too clean. I still have bacon on there, but if I have the option for turkey bacon, I would go with turkey bacon over pork bacon. Regular good old bacon. Either way, try to get something that digests within about 4 hours and that has micronutrients and that has been prepared fresh for you. Not something that came out of a package. Because packaged food is devoid of micronutrients. And even though you've hopefully you've been on top of your micronutrient intake during the week so you don't create a micronutrient deficiency while you're in a caloric restrictive state. So you have to be in a caloric restrictive state, obviously, to get, your body fat under control and reduce that over time. But you shouldn't be in a micronutrient deficient state. So make sure you stay on top of your micronutrient intake and watch this video if you haven't already. Now, during your cheat meals, you still get nutritious food because even though you stayed on top of your micronutrient intake during the week and, take care of your supplementation, it might still mean that you're missing out on certain micronutrients. And again, even a little bit of saturated fat is highly beneficial for muscle building. So you're restricting your saturated fat intake during the week the best you can. And now you have a hamburger or, a little bit of bacon or maybe both. Hamburgers with bacon are pretty tasty and a little slice of cheddar cheese, even though personally I tend to avoid it because it gives me a little bit of acne. So whatever diet model you follow, whether you exclude dairy products altogether to keep your acne at bay, a little bit of saturated fat on a Sunday refeed or Saturday refeed cheat meal is warranted, given that it's coming from healthy food choices, right? You can find saturated fat in all kinds of cookies, or you can find a little bit of saturated fat in your beef or bacon or, eggs. It has saturated fat too. You guys, I'm getting a little bit hungry now. It's beef, bacon, and eggs. I'm going to have that this weekend. Absolutely. Now, this is all healthy food choices. Another food choices that I like is sushi. I tend to eat that a little bit later in the day. So you have a sandwich for lunch or a hamburger for lunch. I think that's totally warranted if you're depleted towards the end of the week. You get a little bit of side dish. Hopefully that's sweet potato fries cooked in the oven with olive oil spray. Again, you can't get this kind of stuff at fast food. You'll need to go to a restaurant that is a little bit more health orientated. And then later in the evening, you maybe have, a couple servings of sushi. Now, the good thing about sushi is, again, if you go to a restaurant that doesn't overdo the sugar, some of the sushi places that are a little bit cheaper, a little bit more affordable, they get that frozen tuna, then the frozen salmon, and they glaze that, sushi rice with sugar. Avoid those places. Go to a nice sushi place that prepares it with love and care and not sends your blood sugar levels, sky high to over 160 milligrams per deciliter. Bring your glucometer with you in case you're unsure. Check your blood sugar levels before you start your sushi binge and check them during and after to see if your blood glucose levels goes out of range. Again, a good sushi place, given that you have decent insulin sensitivity, is not going to send your blood glucose, to the moon. Sushi is a nice place for dinner. If you want to have another hamburger, that's totally fine. You just have to choose foods that have a lot of micronutrients and are prepared fresh. Personally, I'm not a big fan of pizza because, pizza is very easy to overeat considering it's so calorically dense. And it does have a lot of cheese, which, slows digestion. And the protein content of cheese is not as favorable as the protein content within salmon or tuna or beef, that you would otherwise have for a cheat meal. So I would try to avoid pizza unless you're really depleted. And again, all that cheese might contribute to acne formation, which starts, Wednesday or Thursday. And you're wondering, why have I got so many acne? What did I do today? But it's actually the pizza. That it has a delayed response regarding your acne formation. Now, again, if you're highly depleted, pizza might be warranted, but I would limit your food intake to Mexican food, burritos, that kind of stuff. Sandwiches, hamburgers, sushi, those are all Coach VigorousSteve approved because that's what I would have during a cheat day maybe several servings during that day, depending on how depleted I am. And depending how fast it's digesting. Again, because some foods digest slower than others, so you have to space those meals apart, 4 hours, 5 hours. At least, don't overdo your lunch so you don't feel hungry. Did I say horny? You can be horny for dinner. You have your session in and then you go for dinner. You get a little bit of a 10-minute walk. Yeah, works about the same. Try to go something that digests within 4 hours, and then you can have another nice cheat meal for dinner, and don't overeat on either of those lunches or dinners. Now, the key here is to avoid all these cookies and ice cream and cakes and desserts, and snacking during the day, because you significantly raise your caloric intake without really gaining any micronutrients in the process. And again, it's the overall caloric intake that is, going to restore some of the body fat. So let's say you have 2 solid meals, 2 quality meals with a lot of micronutrients and things that can boost your metabolism on your cheat day. Eating over whatever metabolism boost you will get from this food will be stored as body fat. And again, if you're overdoing the calories, especially empty calories like ice cream or cake or cookies, again, I'm hungry, guys. So if I'm thinking about it, but I'm not going to eat it. So if you're overdoing the calories, you will simply restore all the body fat that you lost during the week, or you will store it in stubborn body fat areas like the lower back. And again, if you're trying to do a diet, you want to get uniformly lean and get rid of all these stubborn body fat areas, besides Islamic pharmacology and certain practices added, which I mentioned in this video. But you can really prevent fat loss from your lower back and your glutes and your hamstrings if you keep overdoing the desserts. So you want to avoid those for the majority of your diet until you reach a point of about 8 to 6% body fat. A lot of people will never reach that state until they're happy with 10% or 8%. But as you get more depleted, the refeeds and the cheat meals might be a little bit more exorbitant. You might have to go to a hotel buffet at the end of your day. You have a nice quality lunch, and then you go to the hotel buffet and you slam whatever you see and that you find somewhat nutritious, and then you finish it off with tiramisu or ice cream or, cheesecake. Because you're so depleted, you actually need it. But until you reach that point of severe depletion, you don't need desserts. And I hate to tell it to you, but these desserts are detracting from your progress. All you need is healthy, quality food with a lot of micronutrients in a slight caloric surplus to boost metabolism and restore a little bit of glycogen. And again, at one point, what I noticed with a lot of my clients, let's say around 12% body fat, let's say they start at 20%, you do your weekly cheat meal, you're not that depleted yet, you're not that hungry yet, and then you reach 12% or 10% body fat. That cheat meal is a little bit more, voluminous, a little bit more exciting. So maybe you have a cheat meal for lunch and dinner, and maybe a snack of carbs in between. And at one point, you need to introduce the full day refeed. And you only have one cheat meal at the end. So let's say you refeed 300, 400, maybe 1,000 carbs, depending on how large you are. And that's all coming from rice or oatmeal or potato, whatever carb source you prefer. Again, a carb source with micronutrients, not a carb source that is enriched, like cereal, for example. I'm really not a big fan of cereal. Try to go with something that is, that's growing somewhere, is not that processed. Go with oatmeal or wheat germs or something like that over the cereal. Please. Please don't ask me about rice puffs. That's also processed. So at one point of your diet, you might reach a state of depletion where you need a half a day refeed or a full day refeed followed by a cheat meal. And then you simply eat foods that are nutritious and digest well for you, so it doesn't impact, your dinner with your partner later in the day, because it's the last thing you want. You don't want to go to dinner with a full stomach and feeling bloated and backed up. And now you don't get to enjoy your sandwich or hamburger or sushi meal or whatever, maybe some Italian. That is, Italian's still a little bit risky. A lot of cheese and a lot of oils sometimes. Make the healthy choices which are applicable to your situation. And again, if you're going out for Valentine's Day or a birthday or a celebration, you're excluded from these kinds of practices, because you shouldn't have to sacrifice, your birthday or Valentine's Day if you want to get shredded, unless it's like 3 weeks out for a contest and then you're, a competitive bodybuilder and it might not apply to you anyway. So when you reach a point of depletion and you need a full day refeed, you have to keep the digestion of the food choices into consideration so it doesn't affect your cheat meal later in the day. And when you're absolutely tremendously depleted at, let's say, 6% body fat or 4% body fat, that full cheat day where everything goes, and hopefully you have a coach that will tell you, like, dude, go refeed. And, what do I refeed? Can I have a hamburger and this and this and this? I said, whatever. If you have a good coach, at one point he will probably recommend you just go whatever for one day. You're very depleted at that point, and you still need a little bit of, metabolism boost and glycogen storage and even intramuscular triglyceride storage with a full day of binging, because it's warranted at certain points in preps. And, it's usually only warranted for the guys that are pretty heavy. If you're like 60 kilos, it's probably not required. So again, it's a little bit circumstantial, but at one point, a full day binge might be required. And now for the drug-related content of this video regarding cheat meals. A couple compounds you can incorporate, one of them being Metformin before bed to help with insulin sensitivity overnight, because again, you're eating in a caloric surplus during your cheat day. So you might want to take 500 milligrams of Metformin before bed, so you're in that fat burning state again the next day. And again, you can tell by your fasting glucose concentrations upon waking. The day after your cheat meal, without Metformin, it's usually maybe 100 milligrams per deciliter. If it's any higher, then you probably lost a significant amount of insulin sensitivity and you overdid the carbohydrates and saturated fats. But if you, incorporated some of the advice that I gave you in this video, your blood sugar level shouldn't be over 100 milligrams per deciliter the day after. But you can use Metformin to bring it back nice into 70, 80 milligrams per deciliter. And that allows you to get into the fat burning zone easier when you do your fasting cardio. Again, it might not happen in the first session because your liver glycogen stores are also sufficient after a cheat meal. But after, the second day, you should be in that fat burning state again. And Metformin surely helps with that. And it just helps, with a little bit of glucose disposal overnight, in case you went to bed after a large meal with a ton of carbohydrates. You could use Berberine as well. A combination of Berberine and Metformin also works, 500 milligrams of both. I found that it works a little bit better than 1,000 milligrams of Berberine and 1,000 milligrams of Metformin by itself. But it's 500 milligrams of Berberine, 500 milligrams of Metformin before bed, after your cheat meal or cheat day. Don't take it during the day because you want to absorb carbohydrates. You don't need any glucose disposal. You might only need that when you're inactive during the night. Because during the day, you're actively trying to restore muscle glycogen, and Metformin is going to prevent that by slowing gastric emptying. And it also might inhibit or impair digestion of your lunch meal. And now that 4-hour digestion window is actually turned into 6 to 8 hours. So again, before bed and not during the day. A compound you can take during the day is Xenical or Orlistat, which inhibits lipase activity in the intestinal tract. So now you don't break down fat as well as without the Xenical. Again, it's not a 100% foolproof method, but you will prevent a little bit of fat absorption in the intestinal tract. So if you go with a cheat meal that's pretty high in saturated fat, or maybe oil, you go for like a wonton or a dim sum buffet. It's usually has a lot of oil in there. So I would definitely recommend Xenical or Orlistat. Usually 120 milligrams to 240 milligrams is more than enough to prevent fat absorption from that meal. There's a downside to that, so get your toilet paper ready. By not absorbing fat from your meal, it will end up in the bathroom, and it might be incredibly oily. So, you can prevent a little bit of that by taking like psyllium husk before bed, which, binds to some of the fat. Or you can consider a supplement called Garcinia Cambogia, which helps to bind fat in the intestinal tract. So the Xenical prevents the breakdown of fat and prevents absorption or reduces it. Then psyllium husk helps with excretion, and Garcinia Cambogia also helps with excretion. Just keep in mind that Garcinia Cambogia is also linked to increased liver enzymes. So keep that in mind. Don't take the Garcinia Cambogia and then the next day you go for blood work to check your liver enzymes. They might be elevated with about 10 to 20 points. So keep that in mind. It's not something you want to do frequently, just once in a while when your cheat meal was a little bit more exorbitant than you planned. So Xenical would be my first choice. And again, guys, you don't want to incorporate Xenical with each cheat meal or the entire day, and especially not during the entire duration of your diet, because by inhibiting breakdown of fatty acids, you also prevent the absorption of fat-soluble vitamins. So it's not sustainable. You would do it at one serving at the end of the day, not during the day, and maybe consider combining that with a fiber supplement or a small amount of Garcinia Cambogia to help with the excretion of the fat that you're now not absorbing. And then the last performance-enhancing drug you can consider on your refeed day or cheat day, or even days you simply have a small cheat meal, is a drug or medicine or bioidentical hormone that your body produces naturally called thyroxine T4. Now, when you're dieting, usually slowly over time, your metabolic rate and your thyroid conversion slows down. Now, for the guys that use exogenous growth hormone, they're probably already running 100 micrograms of T4, and this is not really required because growth hormone promotes thyroid conversion from T4 into T3, and they take 100 micrograms of T4 with their exogenous growth hormone to keep their metabolic rate slightly elevated throughout their dieting or off-season period. But for the guys that don't use T4 or growth hormone, you start to see that metabolic rate slowly declines. And on the day you have your refeed or cheat meal, that you're trying to boost your metabolic rate and restore a little bit of muscle glycogen, exogenous T4, 100 micrograms, maybe 200 micrograms of T4 upon waking in the morning, helps with thyroid conversion and raises T3 concentrations while your caloric intake is slightly higher. Because caloric intake really helps with the deiodinase enzymes and their activity, which helps with the conversion of T4 into T3 by removing one iodine atom from the T4 into T3, right? So now it's active and it can help with metabolism. Now, if you take about 100 to 200 micrograms of T4 in the morning of your refeed or cheat meal, it helps to keep your total T3 and free T3 elevated for maybe 4 to 5 days after a single administration if you do that on your cheat day. So without the T4 supplementation, you see that T3 levels decline a little bit faster during the week, and now you have a little bit of impaired metabolism towards the later days of the week before your refeed. But by using supplemental T4 on the morning of your refeed or cheat meal, you see that T3 concentrations stay elevated for longer. So now your overall fat loss is a little bit more effective, even though, keep in mind, you start to get fatigued towards the end of your week also, because your metabolic rate stays elevated, because your T3 and T4 concentrations stay elevated for a little bit longer. So keep that in mind. There's a little bit of a downside to it, but I found that it's highly beneficial for the guys that are not using growth hormone, in which case this protocol is not really necessary because you're supplementing 100 micrograms of T4 on a daily basis anyway. But for the guys that don't have access to growth hormone or can't afford it, a single administration of 100 micrograms to 200 micrograms of T4 on their Saturday or Sunday refeed is highly beneficial regarding their metabolic rate towards the end of the week. And I'll leave it at that, guys. I hope you can plan your cheat days a little bit more favorably so you don't undo all this hard dieting during the week and all these cardio sessions and don't end up with stubborn body fat on your lower back or your glutes or your hamstrings, because you can really set yourself back if you don't pay a little bit more attention to what you're putting in your mouth on your cheat meal or cheat day. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you're looking for the most comprehensive guides to bodybuilding pharmacology, you can find those ebooks on my website, VigorousSteve.com/shop. If you're looking for personalized advice, you can find the rates to my services in the services section as well. Follow me on Instagram at VigorousSteve, Vigorous Crew, androgen deficient front double bicep for you guys. Don't worry, I'll be back very soon. I think I'm about 4 weeks out of my bodybuilding journey, judging by the rate of how it's going so far. Much love. See you guys in the next video.